Hi, my name is Mark Payne. I'm a graduate student here in the Green Group at MIT, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about how to install RMG Pi and some of its related software onto your computer. Specifically, this tutorial will be for people who are using Linux, either in a virtual machine or natively, or Mac OS, and I'll point out the differences between Mac OS. I will happen to be doing this installation on Linux. So there's a couple of key steps. The first big step is making sure that you have Anaconda installed, as that's the thing that we use to make sure we have all the related dependencies in place. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you don't already have Anaconda installed, especially if you're doing this on a server. There's a good chance that you already have Anaconda. The way to check that is you can type which conda, and if it comes back blank like mine, then you know you don't have Conda installed on the machine yet. If that came back with some sort of path to some location, then just go ahead and skip this part that I'm about to say about installing Anaconda. So we need to install Anaconda then. The way you can do that is open up a terminal, or not terminal, a web browser, and just Google Anaconda download. These days they're calling it the individual edition. You can find that, and there should be a nice little download button right about here. If we follow that all the way down to the bottom, you have different download options for Mac OS and Linux. Mac OS, you have the option to choose between a graphical installer and a command line installer. Linux, you have different CPU architectures. Almost certainly, if you have an Intel CPU or an AMD CPU, you're talking about x86. You probably know if you didn't. So safer bet is to assume that you do have an Intel CPU. And I'm going to click this one since I am doing this on Linux. The download will take a few seconds. While I'm saying that, I want to make sure you save the file to your downloads. I want to say a couple quick words about some of you might be heard of Miniconda versus Anaconda. I'm wondering what the difference is. They both install Conda, the package manager. The only difference between the two is what they put in their base environment. For everything that we install going forward, we're going to create our own environments. So it doesn't really matter what goes into your base environment. So if you have Miniconda installed, don't fret. I did full Anaconda, but you could probably save some time by doing Miniconda. Once that's done, you need to run the script that we just downloaded, which on Linux, it goes to your downloads folder. So the way that you can execute that is bash, and then the path to wherever that script just landed. It's okay that we're executing it from downloads folder. It'll install it somewhere else, so don't worry about moving it. When you hit enter, it's going to ask you to read the license agreement, and you can read it while you're doing installation. Since I've done it before, I'll just go ahead and skip to the end and type yes. So at this point, it'll ask you where you want to install it. For me, the default location in your home folder is fine, but if you're working on a server or you want to keep your packages more tidy, you might opt to change this path. But if not, just hit enter, and it'll select the default. Okay, after it's installed everything into the base environment, it'll ask you if you want to initialize Anaconda 3 by running conda init. I would write yes to this, so that way you don't have to worry about appending stuff to your bash or C file. This will handle all of that for you in the most proper way. And then when that is all said and done, you should be good to go. The cleanest way to do next is to exit out of the terminal, because by loading in a new terminal, it'll resource that bash or C file, and now you'll see that you have this keyword base here, letting you know that you're in your base Conda environment, which will make more sense later on when we talk about the environment we're building for RMG. You type which Conda, now you can see that we have Anaconda installed on our system. So that's the biggest thing that you need, but there's also a couple other smaller dependencies. For Linux, this will be stuff like if you type which git. By default, if you've just installed Linux, it's not there. The other ones include GCC, G++, and make. So if any of those turned blank like all four of mine did here, then you have to install these. I'll go over that in a second. For Mac OS X, follow along with what I'm saying, but my understanding is that as soon as you try and install one of these, it'll ask you if you want to install Xcode or something like that on Mac, and it'll install all of these for you. So the way that you want to do this is to do sudo apt-get is the package manager on Ubuntu. There's documentation on our website if you're not using Ubuntu, like Fedora has a different package manager. But sudo apt-get install. Let's start with the first one. So let's install git. Okay, I jumped ahead after we've installed git. So that ran successfully. So we're going to do the same thing for the remaining packages. So you want to install GCC as well. This is your C compiler. Yes, if you are asked about it. Okay. And now GCC is installed. So the other one is G++, which is your C++ compiler. And finally, you'll need to install make. Okay, at this point, we've installed Git, both the C and C++ compilers, and make as well. macOS probably should have been good with just the one installation. If you've gotten through that, then we have Anaconda installed and the other sort of system dependencies you may or may not have installed in your system. So at that point, we can actually get to downloading and installing the RMG software itself. The easiest thing, first off, is to figure out where you want to install it. For me, I like having a folder inside my home directory where I store all sorts of RMG-related packages, so I like to make a folder called RMG. It's completely up to you. Make sure that you get your commands right when you execute them, though. And so I'm going to change my directory, cd, into the RMG folder, which right now is blank. What we're going to go do is we're going to go grab the RMG source code. So we're going to do the installation from Git. We can have another tutorial later on about if you want to do the binaries, but certainly this is the easier of the two. So you can just search for RMG GitHub, and it's common enough that it's probably the first thing that pops up. And this is the GitHub page where we host the RMG code and we're always making commits to. So what you want to do is you want to click on this green arrow and you click on the clipboard, and it'll copy this whole path to your clipboard. That way, when you go back to your terminal or inside our RMG folder or wherever you want to install the RMG code itself, and you're going to type the words git clone, and I'm going to Control-Shift-V to paste that in there. So now it says git clone and address rmgpy.git. So this is the RMG Pi code itself. And this could take a second, but not too long. Okay, and once that's done, then you can install the database folder. You could go to the database website and copy the link. It's just the same link as it was before, which I got to this by doing up arrow on the keyboard, goes to your last command. So then I can just edit that last little bit from Pi to database, and it'll now clone the database folder. And this should take just a second. Okay, so now if we type ls to list the contents inside this directory, we see that we have both the RMG Pi folder and the database folder. So we're almost done. At this point, we need to go to the RMG Pi folder. The database folder is good to go. We type ls, and you can see the contents of the directory. The biggest thing is that we need to create a conda environment for all of the RMG-related dependencies. And the command for doing that will be conda env create -f. That tells it which file you want to create the environment from. And we have this file right here called environment.yml that has a list of all the packages that you need to create your environment. Press enter. And this will take a while, so I will cut away. But if you're prompted to, yes or Y and enter to accept any packages installed. Okay, so after it's installed all the packages, you're ready to activate your environment, which, as the text says right here on your computer screen, you can do by typing conda activate. RMG_env is the name of your RMG environment, and remember this command because you will execute this command at the beginning of any time that you're doing anything RMG related, because otherwise it won't know where all the dependencies are installed. And the way you know that you've successfully activated the environment is now we've gone from our base environment, as you can see here, to RMG_env. So now that you're in your base environment, there's one last dependency that you're going to want to add, which is the location of the RMG Pi code itself. If you look at the documentation online, depending on when you look, or if you've done this in the past, you may have seen recommendations about adding this location onto your path and Python path. We have a better recommended way of doing that now so that it's just lumped inside of your environment. The command that you're going to want to execute, assuming that you are within your RMG Pi folder, so make sure that you are first activated in the RMG environment and in that directory, will be pip install -e /, which the / just means the current folder. And so the -e means it'll install the current directory and developer mode, so it'll just know to look here. And as we'll see, it'll tell us that it's obtaining the file from the current directory and it's installing the package. And because we did pip install inside of Anaconda environment, and installed it only inside that environment. So the really cool thing is, don't follow along for this, but just to show you, is if we were to go back to some random other folder, we would be able to, if you were to start a Python, you can import this module called sys, and if sys.path tells you which things are on your Python path, and you can see that the RMG Pi installation folder is already there. There's some other cool things that happened we'll cover in a second, but I'm going to go back to my RMG Pi folder because there's one last thing that we actually need to do, and there's a lot of C code actually in RMG Pi that we need to compile down, and you do that just by typing the word make and pressing enter. And it'll go through. The way we've actually done it is we have Cython, which first compiles or Cython to C code, and then C code down to machine code. So you see these Cythonizing statements for all the RMG Pi code. This can take a while, so I'm going to skip ahead in a second. The biggest thing that I want to wait on, if I can, is that you'll sometimes see these warnings about compiler warnings warning about NumPy issues and stuff. That's totally fine. Just kind of ignore them until the very end. The reason what's going on there is that Cython is using some old C code stuff that's out of our control. So we'll go ahead and jump to when this all looks okay. Yeah, so just wanted to jump back in here real quickly. I mentioned that there were warnings that would pop up, stuff like this, using deprecated NumPy. Perfectly fine. You'll see that pop up a lot. Just get all the way through the end, and it'll be fine. All right, so if we made it this far to the end, it probably compiled down correctly. So you get this nice little everything was found label right here, which means that we are good to go. If you didn't get that, then further debugging you might need to do make clean and then make again, but you should get to this point. And so the cool thing now is we can test out our RMG installation. I'm gonna go back to my RMG Pi folder. So we can go to examples, RMG, and we have this example that's really quick to run if you want to test out that your installation is working, called super minimal. And to run RMG Pi, all you have to have is this input, which we have this input file right here called input.py. And all you need to do is type rmg.py input.py. And the other cool thing that I mentioned when we did the pip install-e, I said that there was numerous reasons why it was good to do that. You can, if you invoke Python from wherever you are on your computer, you'll be able to access RMG Pi code. But also this binary, rmg.py, has also been added to your path. And that is the file for running RMG Pi, if you will. And you don't have to append anything onto a bash or C file if you've had to do that in the past. This is a much nicer way because it's just kind of stuck in your environment. But if you hit enter and run this code real quick, let's see if it's running. Yes, it is. It takes a little second to load up. It'll go through a little bit of the code of loading in the database, and it shouldn't take too long to generate the mechanism once it's loaded in the database. It's just hydrogen combustion, so there's just not a whole lot of possibilities. Yeah, there we go. It's generating the model. And so you'll go over a little bit more in the future videos about what's going on in all these steps, but these are the individual RMG iterations that you're seeing fly by right now. And at the end, we get this model generation completed. Final model has 12 species, 19 reactions. So if you were able to run this example okay, then RMG Pi is all set up and you're ready to go. Now, with that, there is another bit of code that you probably will want to install. We'll talk later on in the workshop about how you, once you have an RMG mechanism, how you simulate that. And one piece of code for doing that is the reaction mechanism simulator, which has a Python interface that we will install right now. By first getting out of our Conda environment. So we'll do conda deactivate RMG env. Oh, you don't actually need to specify the environment. Sorry about that. And we're going to create a new Conda environment now that'll contain your RMS code. So after you've simulated a mechanism, you can load up this environment instead, and it has everything that you need for running RMS. So first, we're going to create an environment. This environment we're going to do by, let me type out the command first, and I'll explain it. All right, so conda create will create a new environment with the name RMS in env. And just hit enter on that. And again, this might take a few seconds, so we'll probably cut away. Okay, that actually didn't take too long. So then you can conda activate RMS env. So now we're inside of our RMS env. And now we're going to go fetch the PyRMS binaries. And the way you do that is make sure you're within your RMS environment, which you can check, making sure that it says RMS env. So you can do conda install -c RMG and then PyRMS. What's going on here is the -c is telling it which channel on the Anaconda cloud to look for the package named PyRMS, and the channel is the RMG channel where we store a lot of our packages. If you were to hit enter there, it'll install all the needed dependencies. Again, sometimes solving the environment and fetching the packages can take a little bit of time, so we're going to cut away here. Okay, so if we've gotten this far, then all the packages in the environment have been installed, but there's still some compilation that needs to be done with the PyRMS code. And to do that, you just need to type, again, make sure you're in the environment, but type Python -c double quotes import PyRMS semicolon PyRMS dot install open close parentheses. And what that's doing is it's telling Python to run this code, import PyRMS, and then run the function PyRMS install, and it'll install everything behind the scenes for us. Again, this will take a little bit of time, so we'll cut away once it's done. Okay, so after it's done that PyRMS install step, there's just one last little thing that we need to tidy up, and the installation is basically complete after that. So you need to type ln -sfn $, open parentheses, which Python-jl space $, open parentheses, which Python. I'll leave that on the screen for a second. This is just making sure that it's linking the Python binaries appropriately. And let me make sure I don't have any typos in that before I hit enter. And yeah, I think that's everything that we need to do. Okay, and yeah, at this point, you would be good to go. If you wanted to double check that your installation works, you can type Julia and using capital PKG, and then PKG dot test reaction mechanism simulator. And if you were to run that, I think that would tell you whether or not, let me just make sure, get it started. Okay, yes. It'll take a while, so I won't run the full thing, but if you get to the end of that and you don't get any errors, then you know the installation went fine. I canceled out of that. That's why I have an error here. But if you've gone through all those steps, just go ahead and kill this process. Yes. If you've gone through all those steps, then you've installed RMG Pi successfully and the reaction mechanism simulator, which you can use to simulate mechanisms. So at that point, all the software that you might want to install is well, there's other ones you might want to install too. There's also Arc, which is a code for running automated quantum chemistry calculations. If you go back to the GitHub for RMG Pi, you can find the repo for Arc right here. And it has its own documentation for installing, but that's an optional install, especially for the workshop if you're watching it for that. So with that, hopefully everything went fine. Thanks. Bye.